All my friends are synths, and this is the Audiothingies MicroMonsta. The MicroMonsta is an 8-voice polyphonic digital synthesizer. Now, I've got a lot of analog sound sources, and I love the warmth and the character that you get from them, but as I've found, maybe your experience is different, but what I've experienced is that whilst analog oscillators and analog synthesizers sound brilliant, often they are really good at a few things, but not everything, or at least lots of things. And so even though I've got all these cool Commodore 64 synthesizers and Game Boys and Eurorack stuff that's based on analog circuitry, sometimes you want a weird bell sound, or sometimes you want kind of a thick pad that your analog synths aren't able to give you, or at least the ones you've got. And if you want to buy analog synths that give you all those sounds, you're going to end up spending a lot of money. Now, I've been on the hunt for a small digital polyphonic synth for a while, partly because I don't really have any other polyphonic synths. I've got a Vermona Performer, which is cool, but it's 4-voice, and it's a wee bit different in the way it implements polyphony. But anyway, I've been looking for a polyphonic synth. The problem is, a lot of them are very expensive. A lot of them take up a lot of room. I don't have a huge amount of room on my desk space as it is, so I wanted a small unit that would fit in and I could just plug in when I needed. All of those things are not all that common in digital polyphonic synths, at least not without no knobs. So for example, the Waldorf Blofeld is a great small factor digital synth that's fairly inexpensive, but there's not that many knobs on it. I like to twiddle with the knobs, so to speak. Anyway, I came across this Audiothingies MicroMonsta, and it basically ticked all the boxes. It's small, it's got enough knobs and buttons on the front, it's got DIN MIDI in, it's got jack sockets, and the only other contender was the Access Virus, which I had a long time ago and I got rid of because I needed to save some money, and I regretted it because it's a brilliant synth that can do lots of stuff, but I didn't really know whether or not I needed a synth that did all that much. I just needed some extra sound options when a song might need something a bit different to what my analog stuff could do. Anyway, I came across this. It's relatively cheap. I think it was €300. I got this second hand, and the guy, well, I presume it's a guy, the person that I bought it from customized it with these nice colourful knobs, which is also nice. And they built this, well, I think they built it. They even created or threw in this handy wooden case, which is very nice. And it makes it a bit easier to see when you are working with it. So anyway, this just arrived. I've not plugged it in yet at all. But yeah, I'm going to have a play with it and see what kind of sounds come out. A few things worth noting about this. First of all, on the back, we've got USB. It's powered by a 9-volt DC. Can't remember the polarity, so I'll have to check that before I plug it in. I believe it's protected against the wrong polarity though, so that's good. It's got MIDI in and out, and you've got left and right audio, so stereo output jacks. The USB connector, apparently in the first firmware revision, there wasn't any USB MIDI. However, there was a firmware update which apparently gives USB MIDI, so I'm going to see if that's installed, and if not, install that as well. There's no headphone jack, which is a wee bit annoying, but to be honest, I'm only going to be using it with my home studio stuff, not with headphones, so would be nice to have a headphone jack, but whatever. I'm not going to give a big technical review. If you want that, there are other people that have done things like that. Let's see what it does. One thing actually I should mention before I do that is that this is version 1 of the MicroMonsta. There is a version 2 which has updated a whole bunch of things. I don't particularly know what they are, but when I looked at them at the time, there wasn't a huge amount of difference, at least for what I wanted to use this for. So just be aware of that. This is not version 2. So I've got everything set up now. My initial idea was that I would let you witness me turning on the synth for the first time, looking through some of the menu items, talking about them intelligently, and then getting a great sound out of it. But that's not what happened. Basically, I spent an hour looking through menus going, what the f***? Because it's not immediately intuitive. And I couldn't be arsed editing that down into something usable. I've got the synth connected to the Linstrument grid controller over MIDI DIN. The reason I'm using the Linstrument is because it gives you lots of expressive opportunities in the sense that you can change different parameters on the synth by, for example, applying greater pressure on a pad, by sliding your fingers around or whatever. With MPE, you can give each note a different effect. So let's say I press and hold down on one pad for one voice, then I can modulate that voice differently to the note that I am holding down with my other finger. It'll maybe become clearer if I'm using it. To be honest though, I've not used MPE much. There aren't too many synths, especially hardware synths, that support MPE, and so it's pretty cool, and that's also why I wanted to try it with this. I also have to get my excuses in early and tell you that I managed to slice my finger off last night while I was cutting an onion, which basically cauterized the wound, thankfully, but it has meant I've got this plaster which is going to impede my ability to play the instrument even as badly as I normally might. Basically, if we look at the interface of this synth, we have a row of buttons which have a shift function, so each button can act as 2 buttons. We then have these knobs along the top here, which, as I mentioned earlier, the seller that I got this from has changed the knobs out to more helpful colours. There's 6 of these knobs and there's 6 numbers above them, although it's kind of weird because the knobs don't match up very clearly with what parameter you're changing on the screen, so you kind of have to work out where, and it would be good if there was lines drawn or something, but anyway, the parameters seem to change for each patch as well, so it's kind of like you have to get used to whatever patch you're using. If we just play a basic patch, I've got this Jupiter patch on just now, which quite nice. Essentially on the main screen here, which is the home thing, we have different controls. Again, the parameters depend on the patch, but we have things like the filter cutoff and frequency, so quite nice. We also have the mix knob, which is effects mix. So I've gone from fully dry here to a delay. I'll turn that off for now. We can also control the BPM, tempo, all that stuff from the main screen, which is good. And you can obviously clock this from an external source. We have a mod matrix, which basically allows you to send LFOs and various parameters to different things. We have an arpeggiator. I mean, everybody loves an arpeggiator, right? Weirdly, it only goes up to 1/32. Not that I ever use 1/64, but it would be nice to have the option. Next we have the effects. Ping pong delay, filter delay. The knobs are quite sensitive, but you can adjust the sensitivity in the systems page. Although I've played about this and it's still a wee bit finicky. Like if you go too fast, it kind of trips up on itself, and it's partly, I think, because they're endless encoders, which aren't always as nice to use. But anyway, each button has an encoder pressed as well, so you can press it for a different function. And the yellow ones that I've got here let you go up and down between patches. There's 2 different specific polyphonic modes in there, and they basically differ in how they apply the polyphony, which I'm not going to explain because I'll get it wrong. We have a chord function and a scalar function, and then we've got settings for MIDI. At the moment I've got it set up to MIDI MPE, which spreads the voices or the notes across all the channels. I'm going to play a couple of sounds and let you hear them. And as you can hear in that one, basically it cuts me off after I get to 3, or the 3rd note, and that's because I have it set, the unison set to 4, so there's only 8 voices, which means if you play more than 2 notes at the same time, then that's 8, so the 3rd one reverts back to the 1st or whatever. So I'm going to turn it down to 1 voice so we can get the full 8. Now, I've got the expression turned off at the moment so I could show you the sounds without the filter coming in and, you know, all that stuff. So I'm going to turn it on. I'm warning you in advance that I'm not very good at playing the instrument like this, so you'll hear if I start with this. I'm going to move this camera over actually so you can see it. If I slide from the top to the bottom, that's me controlling the filter with the touch, and if I shake my hand, I get some vibrato. Pretty crap vibrato on my part, but anyway. But the cool thing about MPE is I can do that with multiple notes or multiple voices depending on the way it's assigned. So you get the idea. Anyway, I don't think there's too much value in me going through and just playing the presets out of context, so I'm going to go on and play them with drums and stuff in the background like I would if I was actually recording with this. I'm just noticing actually as I'm playing through that there is no reverb algorithm on the MicroMonsta, and I've confirmed online this is the case. It's not just me not being able to find it. While that's not a big deal to me, there's lots of reverbs I like to use. It does seem like a bit of a strange design choice. I would have expected a digital polysynth to have at least one simple reverb algorithm, but there we go. Anyway, so that you can hear what it sounds like with the reverb, because we all know that reverb makes anything sound a bit better, I'm going to now apply some reverb externally in Logic to the MicroMonsta. Up until now, all the effects that have been applied have come from the MicroMonsta itself, but the reverb is obviously going to be applied externally. So that is the Audiothingies MicroMonsta. To be honest, when I first started using it, I was a bit concerned that I'd done the wrong thing because there's so many menus and it's not especially intuitive immediately. It didn't really make sense what a lot of things are or were, and the sounds I was getting wasn't great straight off the bat, which is kind of naive of me to assume, really. The whole reason I got this was because I wanted lots of possibilities, and in order to have lots of possibilities, you're going to have to spend a bit of time to understand how they work. In lots of ways, the MicroMonsta actually does exactly what I wanted it to, but even more so. It's just that I'm going to have to learn something new, and while I don't really want to read manuals when I'm making music, I've got plenty of other gear that I don't have to read the manual for, and I think over time, even though it might take me a wee bit to key into how this works fully, I think it'll be an amazing addition to the studio. The size is perfect, the cost was great, and it's got so many controls and actual tactile bits. If you're looking for a polyphonic synth and you don't want to spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds, you don't have a lot of rack space or a lot of studio space, this is a great option to look into. I'm sure you'll be able to get it sound much better than I have. Anyway, I'm going to go and have a beverage and try and figure out the manual and how the mod matrix works, and hopefully in a few weeks I'll actually be able to get some incredible sounds out of this thing once it's all linked into my workflows and shit like that. So, goodbye.